Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. This evening, we're going to start off with the Chief Ventrud has a presentation.
Odin and Muhammad, would you want to come up here with me? Mayor and members of the council, staff, and those who may be viewing on TV. Just want to take a few moments to recognize the actions of these Way Park officers. I've got a short letter I'd like to read, and when it comes to probably one of the more stressful calls that officers get is a medical when there's a cardiac arrest situation involved. And I just want to share a little bit of background so you know how this happened. This is a letter that I've written to Sergeant Tim DeShane, Officer Arlen Schimmerhorn, Officer Jerry Gangle, and Officer Andrew Lemkuhl. This letter will, they'll receive a pin tonight, and this letter will also become part of each of their personnel files. On February 16th, 2018, at 16:02 hours, Wake Park Police Department officers Arlen Schimmerhorn, Tim DeShane, Jerry Gangle, and Andrew Lemkuhl responded to a medical emergency at 811 7th Street South in the city of Wake Park. Sergeant Tim DeShane was shift supervisor that day. Officer Arlen Schimmerhorn was primary officer on scene, and Officer Jerry Gangle was serving as a field training officer for Officer Andrew Lemkuhl, who at the time of this call was about 6 weeks into his field training program. Upon arrival, the officers found an adult female victim who was unconscious and not breathing. The officers immediately began performing CPR on the victim until Gold Cross ambulance arrived and applied pads for a defibrillator. The victim was shocked 6 times, and the officer performed CPR for about 20 minutes. The victim was transported by Gold Cross to the St. Cloud Hospital, and when she left the scene was breathing and had a pulse. Medical emergencies of this type, when a life is at stake, can be very stressful. Officer Schimmerhorn, Sergeant Tim DeShane, Officer Jerry Gangle, and Officer Andrew Lemkuhl responded in a professional manner, managed the scene very well, and performed as they have been trained. Officer Arlen Schimmerhorn, Sergeant Tim DeShane, Officer Jerry Gangle, and Officer Andrew Lemkuhl are to be commended for their life-saving actions on February 16th, 2018. And as a result of those actions, Hodin Abdullahi and her husband Muhammad are here, and Hodin went down that day, and thankfully she's still here. So, Muhammad, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, we're writing this letter for you. Can we read this letter? She's my wife. On the February 16, she had a medical emergency CPR informant from the officer for a Wake Park department. We believe that the actions taken by our officer helping and a safe life. Due their actions, we would like to present for these officers with a life-saving award for a Wake Park Council meeting. We will be honored to be to have you presented during this life-saving award presentation. The officer being honored for Officer Ashran, that's the name is so hard to pronounce. Yeah. And GM officer is Andrew Lemert. The presentation will take place this Monday, September 8th. Yeah, I say thank you for all of you to meeting here to invite us, and we believe we are very, very excited to invite it for us. for saving life for my husband. Yeah, I say thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Let me pin that one on, Chief.
We do have a few refreshments for the families, if you want to, in the upper conference room down the hall, if you guys want to stop in there for a treat, or you can stay for the council meeting too, whatever you prefer. We're so glad you're doing well, and
That's not much of an option, I'll tell you that.
so,
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
That was nice. Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
All right, is there anyone here for the 2-minute open forum? Anyone here for 2-minute open forum? Anyone for 2-minute open forum? If not, we can review and approve the council agenda.
I have no,
I'll second as presented, huh?
Yep. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Consent agenda items. Item A, approve city council minutes for 7/16. Item B, approve city council minutes for 7/30. Item C, approve resolution calling for a public hearing on proposed property tax abatements. Item D, approve temporary one-day liquor license for Great Theater. Item E, approve strong beer liquor license for La Perle Market. Item F, approve custom builders consulting service proposal for the AMP project. Item G, approve energy modeling proposal for Wait, is it Wait or White?
it's supposed to be a D, sorry,
Oh,
not a
okay,
G.
okay. Wit Group,
Yeah, white.
White Group. H, approve change order number 1 on overlay improvements. Item I, approve well number 6 change orders number 3. Item J, approve 10th Avenue Trail Improvements Award as recommended. Item K, approve joint powers agreement with the City of St. Cloud Attorney for prosecution and code enforcement services.
Let's see, I'd like to pull that weight, energy consultant, which is number
B.
E.
Anything else?
I'll move to approve all but G.
Second.
Further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Mike, item G.
I guess, looking at this, how many different consultants and things is a architect going to hire at our expense
This is
for this project?
this is a requirement by the state.
For
It's
the
not something-
bonding money. That's why we're
It's not,
doing this.
it's actually a part of the environmental code, so whether it be a bonding request or not, there's an energy code that you have to comply with, and you have to do this type of modeling. So whether, and there's also a requirement under the B3 that would also look at doing this modeling as well. And so it has to be somebody independent. It's not something that an architect can design and then do the modeling. There's a conflict of that. So this is a requirement to do that.
Okay.
All right.
I'll move to approve G.
Second.
Further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, passed unanimously. Regular agenda, item A, 2019 general fund preliminary budget and levy. Council, you've seen the preliminary budget. I guess this is just to adopt it. That just means that we can't go down, we can't go up from here.
We didn't finish
We haven't, no,
the consent agenda, I don't think.
Yeah.
yeah, we have. Yep,
Yep.
yep.
All right, I'll move to approve the resolution adopting the preliminary 2019 general fund budget.
Second.
Before you take action, I just want to make an announcement that the city council will hold a public hearing regarding the 2019 proposed budget and tax levy on Monday, December 3rd, 2018 at 6:45 PM at the Waite Park City Hall.
All right, further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, passed unanimously.
All right, then I'll also move to approve the resolution adopting the preliminary 2019 property tax levy.
I'll second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. All right, rural tax rate. We do that every year just because we have some people that came from the township that aren't at city rates yet, so.
I'll move to approve the 2019 rural tax rates.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Item C, ordinance considering Stearns Electric franchise fee.
Mr. Mayor and council members, actually, the two ordinances with Stearns Electric and Excel Energy are really, they mirror each other, and this is the last part of the process to be considering the electric franchise. The fees that are being proposed are consistent with those in our surrounding communities. The fees have been discussed with both Excel and Stearns. You might see parentheses in there because what we were really trying to do, the fee structures for Stearns and the fee structure for Excel are a little bit different. So we were trying to mirror those two fee structures as closely as we could because what we wanted to ensure was that those rates were consistent, whether you were an Excel customer or whether or not you were a Stearns Electric customer.
And these monies are gonna actually go to maintaining the right-of-ways and easements for these utilities?
No, these monies will come to the city of Waite Park, and we're gonna use them for road projects.
Which is for the same types of things that we would be, which involves right-of-way.
Which is
Yeah.
right away, but it's not necessarily for their right away.
That's correct.
It's just, it's our streets.
Okay, I'll move to approve ordinance number 2018 dash. You'll number it, okay, regarding Stearns Electric franchise fee and summary publication as presented.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, passed unanimously. And the next one is for Excel Energy.
That's basically the same.
It's identical.
It is.
It's identical.
I'll move to approve 2018 dash
Whatever.
whatever.
I'll second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, passed unanimously. Item E, ordinance amendment, ordinance 55, telecommunication towers and antennas. John?
Mayor Miller, council members, you may recall sometime over the past year, we've been in progress with this. We actually saw some discussion at a work session sometime back. I believe it was actually while the council chambers were under work and we were meeting downstairs, looking at an ordinance amendment on antennas and cell towers, by which instead of meeting the standard 125% height for a fall zone, we would allow potentially an option to utilize what they call a fall letter in lieu of meeting that setback requirement, by which basically if they submit if the applicant submits and goes through the conditional use permit process, a fall letter that guarantees that the structure is designed to buckle over and collapse on itself straight down, that they could utilize that distance instead, rather than just a straight setback. That was coming up in discussions with property owners in the industrial areas where they like to keep these items because of potential future expansion plans and kind of trouble locating the antennas with the standard height in play. The ordinance amendment is pretty basic, but allows them to use a fall letter submission in lieu of meeting the 125% height. So I would recommend the ordinance amendment as outlined in the report. The text amendment is in italics and underlined if anybody wants to review.
Is this something we're sure we want to do? I mean,
Well, if it's gonna fall flat on itself, it doesn't make any sense
yeah,
to have.
how does it, I can't say I've ever seen any that survived something that I would know that it would fall.
I'm gonna say
on
you're pretty
itself.
lucky.
Yeah, that was kind of my question to this, same as Frank is, how can we guarantee these are gonna just fall down like an
Crumble.
accordion?
It's designed by an
mean,
engineer.
They're designed that way. We had that discussion, I remember that night, and it was a very good discussion, because actually we had people here that knew what they were talking about, so.
Yeah, and as part of the conditional use permit, because pending approval of this request tonight, soon after we actually have a conditional use permit request that utilizes that fall zone aspect, because we anticipated that it could be approved tonight. As part of the conditions of approval, as with that request and with any standard, just as an extra safeguard for the city, I would recommend as a standard term that the applicant or property owner would be liable for anything that would occur beyond the edge of their property line or outside of the fall zone. It's just a little bit extra safeguard for us. But these are, I mean, there's not a heck of a lot to these structures. I mean, if they come down, I think they're, if it comes straight down, it's not necessarily, it's not minor at all, but it's not like one of those large towers where you see out in the more rural areas where one of those will come down where they're several hundred feet tall. This is a 150, 100-foot tower, and if it collapses in half and falls, it could be a pretty tight radius. I think they could be engineered pretty well to do that just based on their.
Is that insurance clause a standard part of the ordinance?
That's not within the ordinance, but I opted to incorporate it within the conditional use aspect instead, because we do require that for any sort of antennas. And that gives a little more flexibility on a case-by-case scenario to me. I mean, if it's something the council would prefer to see, I guess we could revisit it and bring it back. But I thought the conditional use permit process allows a little more flexibility if there's a particular site that there might be more concerns with for one reason or another.
But requiring the fall zone would limit where they go.
That was kind of the intent of the ordinance, is to open up a little more flexibility. Because if it wasn't an issue, it didn't come up, I guess I wouldn't bring it up. But instead of looking at a variance for a one-time applicant, I thought it was maybe better to look at addressing the ordinance as a whole, because it's very likely that because we have dwindling sites in the industrial areas or the ag rural residential areas where we allow the antennas, which is pretty tight on its own compared to a lot of cities. If we want to keep those there and not be pressed into allowing them in more areas like we see with those small cell sort of things, I think just the long-term plans of some of the businesses in those areas preclude them from meeting the fall zone. It's easier for everybody, applicants and us, if they're able to just meet the requirement and call it a day. But when they're looking at areas like Prosper Drive, like the one that's under consideration, or potentially could be tonight, Burnix, some of those areas are, if they've had discussions with the property owners, but the property owners say, well, we don't want to put anything there because we may expand into that area at some point, or we use that area for parking and we just can't get around it. And there's some factors in play that make it a little difficult.
But if we don't take site individually, they can just go up anywhere.
They're still gonna need a conditional use.
Yeah,
permit.
they still need a
So-
conditional
so
use
we are
permit.
we are gonna look at every
Well,
site
not if they
individually.
meet.
And they're still limited to only I-1 light industrial and ag-rural residential areas.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing that's proposed to change is the allowance for, to put them closer to the property line basically than they would otherwise be, because the intent is that instead of falling over, that they just collapse straight down, so it's,
I'm also thinking about line of sight and how many of these things will be up. What's the potential landscape look like of the city?
well, what I've been told, and I can certainly let the applicant speak to this as well, they're better versed in it than I am, but that if you reduce the setback requirement through the use of a fall zone option, every tower can be made a little bit taller potentially. Like the request for tonight would be a 150-foot tower versus a typical 100-foot tower, because it makes it a little easier to deal with the setback requirement. If you make each tower a little taller, you may
Limit the
see a
number.
reduced overall number of towers.
What's the fall zone for a 150-foot tower?
It's based on the radius. With a fall letter, it could be as little as 50 feet. But for a standard, right now as ordinances, a 150-foot tower would be 125% of 150 feet. So you'd be looking at more, 300 plus feet. Or no, not 300,
No,
closer
100,
to,
175,
yeah,
180.
175. I was thinking 200%.
125% of the height. So you multiply that, and that gives you the zone it has to follow.
Yeah, the idea is that right now is that it's assuming worst case scenario that would just tip straight over, but still not be anywhere near the property line, because there would be that extra 25% buffer.
Okay, how tall is this, 150
No, this has
feet?
got nothing to do with
Th-
this
this
one.
isn't-
This
this
is the
isn't that-
ordinance.
Yeah, I know, but he's proposing.
That's a
100
whole different thing.
Well,
That's,
Yeah,
has
yeah, it
to do-
is. It's a whole different thing.
that's a separate agenda item, Mike.
Yes, I know, but I'm just
Yeah.
asking, he's gonna propose for about 150-foot tower, right? Or 125?
Yep, that's correct, 150
Okay,
would be
now,
the
we have
later
a
proposal.
problem with our other ordinances relating to the height of these signs. That is an equal problem. If we start putting up these towers at these taller heights, our sign ordinance is gonna go to junk, because we're allowing towers to go up to 150, whatever it is they want, but yet
Well,
we won't allow a sign to go up over.
we already allow for towers to go that tall. There's no cap on them as long as they can meet the setback requirements of the fall zone and the conditional use permit. And I don't think there's necessarily a lot of correlation between an antenna and a sign. We don't have a lot of people clamoring for constant antenna variances or those sorts of things.
Do we require more than one receiver on those
Yeah,
towers?
they have to be set up in such a way that,
Yep.
under the ordinance, that they have to co-locate. And we
Yeah.
see those requests all the time.
And
where
that helps, because the higher they go, probably the more they can get on it, the less towers we have in our town.
Yep,
That's correct.
That's a standard requirement, and
Which is why it's being brought forward this way.
All right, council, any other discussion?
Well, it doesn't give me any warm fuzzies, this one.
The one other point about the insurance requirement, if you're more comfortable, you could make that as as part of the amendment, so it could
That's
be
what I would
considered,
do if I
yeah.
propose the amendment.
just so you
But
know
isn't
that.
that part of the CUP?
It can be, but what you
It can
could
be
do is
either
just
one.
make it in the ordinance. If you make it in the ordinance, then it's
Then
always
it's
gonna be
there.
a requirement in every application that comes in. That'll make sure that it is always a requirement.
Well, I'd make the motion to approve the text amendment to ordinance 55 as presented, also adding the condition of insurance.
Second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? John, do you have a problem with that?
I don't. My only question would be, and this perhaps would be a question for the city attorney, is whether the ordinance as modified tonight would have any relevance and delaying the potential conditional use permit request.
That's a separate item.
It is,
one
I mean,
right after this
just as if we could proceed with that request, because otherwise it would. Okay.
All right. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Yes.
Yes.
3-2, it passes. All right, item F, consider a CUP to allow for 150-foot monopole cell tower at 633 Prosper Drive.
As I referenced in the last report, this would be the first antenna request and the first antenna I've seen since I've been here in nearing 4 years for a new antenna. This is at Stone Holdings at 633 Prosper Drive. This is an I-1 light industrial zone. This tower would be a 150-foot monopole, similar in design and construction to what you see at Horizon Roofing, which is almost a half mile away, which exceeds the 1/4 mile minimum. The proposed placement of the tower and the associated pad and facilities in the southwest corner of the property largely shields it from adjacent 7th Street and County Road 137. It would have some visibility from 17th Avenue and the Public Works facility. So I would recommend that if going forward, that we would require the fencing around the equipment and base to be either of a solid wood or vinyl type material, or in lieu of that, if it's more comfortable, we could certainly accept chain link, provided that there's a landscaping plan provided. But I think I'd be more comfortable with a solid wood type fence in this case. That would be my recommendation, but I'll leave that up to the council for discussion. There is a bit of wooded area to the north of where the base facility is, and that limits visibility a little bit from the north. And then the storage facility is to the south, so it's shielded from that. There are some renderings in your packets as well to give an idea of what the actual request to be looking at. My recommendation would be for approval of the request with the conditions as outlined. For conditions number 2, I think I'd recommend that we limit the fencing to being either a solid wood or a vinyl fence.
And we have say in that CUP on what that looks like, so they can't put up car shop lumber and.
And I would recommend that it not be chain link with vinyl slats,
No, I
because
don't.
I think that we've allowed that in the past in some areas, and it's not been very,
But we
Not
have
done.
final say on the look of that fencing.
Yeah, if the council makes the motion to limit it to solid fence, then that's what it would be, and that would have to be reviewed as part of the building permit. And I would note, this is the only exception in our ordinance where we allow for taller fencing than the standard 6-foot height. It has to be between 8 and 10 feet.
We're also going to include the insurance requirement here.
Yep, we can, we can include the insurance requirement. I think we could add that as number 4. It does dovetail a little bit with condition number 3, that in event of catastrophic failure which results in fall or damage radius exceeding the terms set forth in the submitted fall letter, applicant shall be responsible for damage to any adjacent properties impacted by tower collapse or damage. I think we can just amend that language a little bit, perhaps to include that documentation or proof of insurance shall be provided on an annual basis.
I'm comfortable with that.
All right, your wishes?
Can I just ask a point of clarification on that? Are we then gonna, John, require that they're gonna provide us a copy of that certificate?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, but I would want to see that just on an annual basis.
Yeah.
I mean, at time of application and on an annual
okay, that
renewal.
was just, I wanted to make sure that we had some documentation of how it was gonna continue.
Yep,
Okay.
Yeah, because years forward, you got to make sure it's still insured.
yep. That's something we'll have to set as basically an ongoing reminder. I mean, we can set that up. It's probably on a Jan 1 basis.
Carlos just going out.
Some of these towers in the past,
Carlos just going out to see, one of the things we haven't talked about, what the insurance limits are. You've said insurance.
Oh.
I think our standard coverage is $1 million for everything. Because the tower could land on a person as well as it could land on a building.
Right, okay. What'd you think?
So do
In
you
the
want to have
past-
them to wait?
She's gonna be
Just
back.
wait 1 minute.
So I
1
think,
million.
I think we ought to make $1 million for both the insurance cover here and as well as the ordinance we just approved.
We could connect it just to the standard insurance requirement in as part of the language.
Yep.
All right, Mike?
In the past, when we were talking about these towers, a lot of the tower companies say they can camouflage these towers so that you could hardly see them. Have you talked or discussed anything about that? In other words, like this tower here, I think if you painted it the color blue, that would blend in with the sky when you look up and to see it, that it would kind of disappear, where some of these other ones, when they put them on, they would have to paint them the same as their buildings and things like
Yeah,
that.
I think that's, to me, that's either more appropriate, and if you have say a heavily wooded area where the trees or natural features would be at a similar height or
I'm not
similar
talking
design.
camouflage. Camouflage, I mean, to blend in with the background that it's in.
Yeah, I guess I had considered that, but honestly, I think a tower painted blue to match the sky would inadvertently stick out more. That's just my thought, but feel free to disagree.
Some of them, when we had pictures years back, I believe, they blend in pretty well with the areas when there were towers like this, or the smaller towers even, so that it kind of disappeared a little bit. Not making the area, especially if we're gonna start popping these up all over.
I don't think that these are, as I mentioned, this is the first one I've dealt with in coming on 4 years. We're not getting a lot of requests for these, and we may see, just based on our area and the quarter mile limitation between them, we don't have a heck of a lot of additional areas where they can be supported. I mean, maybe out in Industries West perhaps, but interior of town where they're trying to locate one, they kind of struggled to find a location that worked here.
All right, council, your wishes?
I will move ahead to approve the conditional use permit, including the three conditional use permit examples there, 1, 2, and 3, and adding number 4 for the required insurance.
You want to make sure that your number 3, though, it includes solid fencing.
All right, number 2, to include solid fencing. Did I cover it?
I
Second.
think so, yep. Further discussion? All in favor? Oops,
Solid fencing.
solid fencing,
Solid-
not chain link.
With vinyl slats, because that can be
That's-
considered
that's-
solid fencing.
Sure, accept that amendment for me.
Yeah, not chain link.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yes?
3 to 2, it passes. All right, item G, preliminary and final plan for YRC addition Anderson Trucking property on Old Highway North.
Members of the council, this item is probably the first tangible result you've seen off of the investment made in paving and resurfacing Old Highway Road North. The YRC addition is a portion of the Anderson Trucking property, a 5.25 acre parcel that's being split and platted in anticipation of a development of a small freight terminal in that area. The platting is required because it's has not been previously platted, and we require that prior to any sort of construction. Currently out there, we have other industrial type uses, including Pomp's Tire and the warning lights facility, which found a nice home on part of the Anderson Trucking property. The applicants are only opting to split or to plat the 5.2 acre portion right now. They do have marketing of the other areas going on, but they're gonna hold off on re-subdividing those additional areas until end users are identified, and they can kind of cater those plats to meet their needs. So as additional businesses or development happens out there, we're probably gonna see additional plats in the future that reconfigure that a little bit. The applicants have been coordinating with city staff on their preliminary development plans. The freight terminal is a permitted use in an I-1 area. That doesn't require any specific planning commission or council review, at least at this time, as none of their proposed development is needing any variances or anything like that. Since the property has not been previously platted, we do require the parkland dedication or the payment in lieu. The park board has accepted my recommendation of a recommended payment in lieu of $11,420. That's based on the established value of the land and taking 5% of that value per the county assessor's office. The park board did recommend that amount, and we're comfortable with that. This is a single lot, single block, so it is fairly straightforward. So my recommendation would be for approval of the preliminary plat with the conditions of number one, a development upon the property may be subject to a development agreement with the city if deemed necessary. And number two, a payment in lieu of parkland dedication shall be made to the city of Waite Park in the amount of $11,420 prior to affixing of city signatures upon the plat. Provided that those two conditions are satisfied, I'd also recommend approval of the final plat.
All right, it's nice to see that there's some development, some action out there, so,
I'm sure they appreciate the nice smooth road.
yeah.
I'll move to approve, including conditions 1 and 2.
Second.
Yep.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passed unanimously. All right, item H, vacation of right-of-way of Anderson Trucking Property, Old Highway North.
This item is kind of a secondary item to YRC edition. During the review of that with the applicants and the end developer there, we identified that there's actually some right-of-way within the Anderson Trucking property. It's kind of a cul-de-sac that was kind of built over and seemingly like it was never properly vacated in the past years. It was partially platted out with a lot of smaller lots, and that right-of-way has remained, as far as we can tell, to this day. So we figured we'd take the opportunity to vacate it at this time and clean it up a little bit while we were working on it. Partially for the current proposed subdivision, but probably more so for future subdivisions. They'll just make it a little bit easier as time goes on. So I'd recommend approval of the vacation as described and submitted.
So move.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Did you ever get rid of the snow fence easements out there? Wasn't there snow fence easements on that property some places? Did you get rid of them? Yeah. Okay, good. All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Item I, award of park bathroom and maintenance building and also, park bathroom and the maintenance and bathroom facilities at Rivers Edge Park.
So the good news is that we had gone out for bid on both of these projects, and the bid, the total bid that was submitted by Custom Builders at $601,000 for both buildings. That is a good bid. Staff, as a result of that, is recommending that we move forward with both of them. Our intention was, we were hoping to keep that number in as long as it stayed within the amount that we had for sales tax budgeted, and it does that. And so the recommendation would be to move forward.
Does that include the time locks, the electronic time locks, or is that another feature?
The other items that I would suggest would be also to approve the alternates as well. The base bid was the $601,000, and then the time locks, I believe, were 4,300 and
43
yeah.
and 42.
So considering those alternates as well, those numbers still come underneath what we were projecting to use for sales tax this year. And so we would recommend approval.
Will they start on those this year?
Yes.
All right, council?
I'll move to approve.
Community park project there, $235, and then the Rivers Edge, that include building the garage and the
Yes.
storage with
Yes.
that?
Right,
Yep,
yeah.
Frank, you
You know,
moved
for
this?
235,000, you can build a nice house.
I can tell
And
you,
you-
the first estimate that came in on that was $900,000.
I know. But this is utterly, I mean,
Mike, the average starter home was 250,000.
this is
well,
a
you're
great
only
bid.
15,000 away.
I'm gonna move to approve
Living in a
with the
bathroom.
alternate.
With the alternates 1 and 2.
I'll second.
All right, further discussion now, if you want some.
Now you can discuss.
Yep.
I don't know, it's just utterly ridiculous what the price of
A little brick
passing
building
a
is.
little water around does,
This is,
you know,
this is way underneath what the,
I know, I understand that, but
So-
it's
Just
still,
for the park bathroom was $900,000 the first estimate.
I don't disagree. I
gonna
sometimes
put the
wonder.
red carpet out before we go in, or what?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah.
4-1.
Mike, they're gonna hand you a hot towel.
Hot toast?
Had to be gold-plated fixtures.
All right, approve bills.
I have one question on the bills. We paid Cutting Edge Lawn Care $410.50 for Parkberry Apartments. Something to do with Parkberry Apartments.
I'm assuming it's because they didn't mow their lawn, and so we have a contract that comes out, and then we bill them back for that.
Oh, because I thought it was some kind of irrigation repair. So we got apartment buildings that don't mow their lawns.
Well, I guess I'm making an assumption that that's what it was. That's not what you think it was? When you said lawn service? What are the
All it said,
descriptions?
it said briefly something about lawn irrigation.
Did we,
I mean, you can get back to me, I just thought it was weird.
did we cut some off when we did some road projects someplace?
Well, that's why I was wondering if we chopped something that was in the right of way.
We could find that out. I can find it out, and then
Yeah,
we'll
I'd like
send
to
an email
know.
to you to let you know what it is.
All right,
I assumed when it was lawn care that that would have been the most logical thing that we would contract those
well, it
services out.
mentioned irrigation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it did actually say irrigation repair.
Blackberry,
What was
where
the
is
Parkberry?
Yeah, it was,
Where's Parkberry?
It's on, next to the old Public Works facility, right? I think so.
Yeah, we could have cut some, well, I don't know, Sixth Avenue? Yeah, okay.
well, that's,
Yeah, just get back to us. And your wishes on the bills.
I'll move to pay the bills.
Second.
Further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Shawna?
Looking at setting up a time for New West to come in, and right now, the tentative time frame that I've got all the parties is the 23rd through the 25th of October. There's lots of pieces of that. I don't have a confirmation yet. I just sent that back out to see. So at some point in that conversation would be involvement on your side of that as well. They'll also meet with the architects. Mammoth Productions would also looking at coming in, and that's where I left it this afternoon, was that they were verifying whether or not that worked in their schedules. So I will be in touch on that.
Okay.
We're also looking at doing, the area administrators are looking at putting the joint cities meeting together with a potential candidate forum. And so I'm waiting to hear back on that. That would be the meeting in October. I think it's the 30th of October, a Tuesday. So I will stay tuned for more details. With the election in November, the council meeting that we need to canvass our elections, being we have a municipal election this year, and that needs to be done between the 9th and the 16th of November. So we didn't really feel that we needed to have a meeting the day before the election. We could have everything on that. There is some of the pieces with the bonding of the amphitheater project that we need to do. So the date that we were looking at was that Tuesday, the 13th, because Monday, the 12th of November is Veterans Day. We were looking at doing that at 4:30, unless you wanted to do it later, but Keith has to be at that meeting, and he's got a conflict that night. So I'm trying to figure out, and then the rest of the week is the coalition's legislative conference in Alexandria. So I'm trying to find a date that gets all those requirements done. So I'm hoping that it works for all of you. How's that?
Yeah, that should work.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's all I have.
All right,
I got something for you. Seeing that Bill isn't here. In the past, we've had complaints in the PD about the fumes from the fire department that are being brought in when they're running their trucks for a period of time in the garage, and whenever they do any maintenance in the garage, it has to do with a lot of fumes. I thought we had kind of talked about and taken care of that problem. If we haven't, I would suggest that we get on it right now, that it doesn't happen anymore in the future, so that the people in the PD do not have to breathe these hazardous fumes that are coming in. I don't know what it's coming in from, ventilation or hole somewhere, but I would suggest that we no longer sit back and wait and see what's happening, that we get it taken care of now.
Wasn't that addressed last year?
Yeah,
I was
we've
gonna
actually
say-
had McDowell come in. We actually had a mechanical
Still,
engineer.
It is still happening.
Well, then you're hearing that and I'm not.
Well,
How
it's,
about Chief, are you hearing that?
it's been brought forward, so.
The, excuse me, the incidents of that exhaust are much less. There definitely have been some improvements. We did have some fumes from, I believe, the floor in the fire department was, I don't know what you call it, kind of an
They were
epoxy.
working on it, yeah.
You know, the surface on the protective coating, whatever, on the cement, kind of a glue smell did make its way in, maybe a week or two ago. But prior to that, it's been really much better. So I don't know what more. There was some talk about extending the height of the exhaust pipe for the fire department in hopes that maybe if it was higher than the intake for the PD, that any fumes that are exhaust would blow over the top. I would have to check with maybe Jerry and or Bill and just see if that has been done. I do remember some conversation like that, but I am not sure if that's been done yet or not.
There were some improvements that were made that they did extend those things up to do that. There are going to be some occasions when there's a north wind that some of that stuff cannot be prevented. The fumes, when you're doing projects, when you're doing remodeling projects of any kind, you're gonna have that. We can smell those things all the time, whatever that might be. So I know that the Public Works Department has worked diligently on trying to address those issues. And so I think that a lot of those things, for the most part, have been addressed.
They have been reduced, but they have not gone away. So
Well, I don't know if you're ever gonna get rid of it when you're building,
Exactly
when your
it.
building sits next to another building without airtight doors, and you start diesel in them, anything, gas, you're gonna smell it. So
What-
I hope they're better, and I hope that the reason is because the wind's blowing wrong or
Part of it
whatever.
too is if the doors don't both get opened up by the firefighters, that creates some of that airflow issue inside. And so that depends on, sometimes that's, depending upon a firefighter that might be newer, that might not happen when they're doing truck checks, depending on when they're doing that. So I know on occasion that has been an issue as well, and that's been addressed through Jim with them. So
Well,
I
I
think
said I
they've
would-
really tried it.
I said I would bring it forward, and if there's any further problem and anybody's health becomes in danger, my hands are washed. Thank you.
Do they, when they run the engines, do they have an exhaust pipe outside? Do they?
They don't run them inside except to start them.
To start
Yeah.
them. No, there's no exhaust.
No, they let them run
for
inside
every-
also.
Well, when you get a fire call, the first guy, sometimes they'll start the truck before they get dressed, just to build air pressure. But that,
I just
You know.
brought the problem forward, and if you don't want to address
Well,
it,
the-
that's up to you.
we've addressed it.
We have.
We've
Yeah,
we've
in-
more than addressed that.
Not only that, but Bill Schlenz is the one that's handled most of this, and he's at a conference this week, so if there's any further questions about it, I would encourage you to discuss it with him. I know that there's been a lot more done. I'm giving you a high-level review of it, and I haven't heard those complaints, and obviously neither has the chief.
I remember over the last
Yes,
whole
we
year
have.
discussing what's been going on with that and what is being done. We talked about it in work sessions, so
I know we had talked about getting something done and things were done, but
it's amazing they don't
it-
smell their own exhaust from their own squad cars in the basement.
They might.
They're all
There's
housed in the
no-
same
yeah,
building.
There's no question it's much improved. The frequency of those incidences is way down, so that's good news, I guess.
All right. John, you got anything? The other John already had his say. Chief, you got?
I'm good.
Carla? Keith? Gordon? All right. If not, we are adjourned at 7:20.